Welcome to Synced on Air. We are brought to you by Turfs Up Radio, and I'm your host, Angelique Robb from Synced, and I have Mark Woolbright with me today. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, good morning, and thanks for having me on.
Sure. Well, I found your products and, had to find out more about it. And turns out you have so much history. I thought it would be great to bring it to our audience's attention and just talk a little bit more about all the stuff you've been doing since, let's see, you're in St. Louis, Missouri. Is that right?
I am, yep.
And with VerdTech is your company just now, but you have a long history in the industry. And what industry would you call that? Is it construction or horticulture or somewhere in between?
You know, I just I try to categorize it as just green building,
Okay,
and
good.
maybe that's because I'm old school and I've been around since the coining of that term. but, but but yeah, that's what I'd say, or green infrastructure, because we function in retaining walls and vertical living walls and vertical gardens and things like that. So they're all enhancements to architecture and the built space, around people. So very much dead center in the concept of biophilia is where our
Great.
products sit.
Great. No, thanks for clarifying that because I feel like biophilia, the word is a very new word, and living walls and such are pretty new. But at the same time, when I look back at what you've been doing, you've been in this realm since 1992. So
Yep.
tell us how you got started in it and you know what you've been up to all this time.
Yeah. Right. Well, I got an early start. I was only 5 years old in 1992.
Oh,
So
wow.
no, it's amazing how long I've been at this, and I'm not sure where all the time went. But yeah, I didn't graduate college until '87, and by '92, I was an entrepreneur with my first company, and that was in the living retaining wall space. And it's kind of hard to believe where all the time has gone. But you know. You'd kind of mentioned that you'd looked at our products and you'd found us through our company VerdTech, and that is our actual company name, and our go-to market face is Vertical Garden Supply and verticalgardensupply.com these days. But there's no way to tell the tale. Like everything that VerdTech is, most all the products that are offered on our website, all of them are sort of the culmination of everything I've learned after 30 plus years in this particular marketplace as an inventor and product designer and system innovator, that type of thing. So it's hard to put all that on a website that doesn't just put people to sleep. It's like nobody wants to read anything. But I think there's very few companies out there that have the kind of deep knowledge of a niche like we do. So it makes us a great resource. I mean, we have a lot of deep experience to draw on when people ask questions, which sort of surprises everybody, actually.
Well, yeah, because like I was at Cultivate conference in Columbus, Ohio recently, and
Yeah.
I was meeting a landscape designer. And I said something about retaining living walls, and she went, "What? Wow." And I guess I think of it as a new thing too, but like you said, you were doing this a long time ago. What did the product look like in 1992?
It looked very similar to my current reprocessed plastic retaining wall module, the Varden
Okay.
P100. So uh, I started off with a dry cast concrete block, and it was there was no way to make this block. It was three-dimensional. It had a big fill receiving trough in the behind the face. The face was taller than the side rails on it. So that it had a stacking height of 8 inches, but the face came up like another 3 or 4 inches. And you installed them with a space, and you filled the pocket behind the face with soil, and the space between them was soil, and all the overburden was carried in that facial column there, and held in by the extended height of the face of the block. So it made a really big fill receiving pocket and it made a really nice wall structure. And then, of course, you've got all that fill in there that to increase its weight for engineering purposes, but then you can also plant in it. And the
Hmm.
block was open at the back, so it didn't have a rear wall. So roots could go back, moisture could move
Into
through
the
the
bank.
hillside, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's just a really really cool system. And that's how we got to start. I had designed the system after traveling in Europe after college. And I was running around with a backpack after college, and I saw the way a lot of the European countries utilize their space. I mean, they were growing in everything,
Yeah.
window boxes, totally grown in tiny little yards. I mean, they didn't have the space that we have
That
here
we
in the
have.
United States, right?
Yeah.
But they maxed it out and they surrounded themselves with plant material.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was super cool, and it needed to come to the U.S. Sooner or later, we would appreciate the space we have, but things would get more dense. And I designed this series of plantable retaining walls, sort of in the spirit of these European systems, and went to market, and there was no concrete machine that would make it. So we
Oh,
had to design our own machine from scratch and our own processes, and survived all of it to grow a great business. And we sold millions and millions of square feet of this concrete block in various sizes for structural and living retaining walls. And it was super new then, and there wasn't any internet at that time either. So
so maybe harder to spread the word. Well, and where did you, I mean, is there a particular city or area in the US that you sold a lot of these blocks to, or was it spread out, or and do you have that
yeah,
information?
well, concrete is heavy, and those particular walls worked on weight and friction. So, you can only ship concrete so far before the shipping cost outweighs the
Outweighing.
product itself.
Yeah.
So, the preponderance of all the material that we made and sold was around the St. Louis area, but
Okay.
certainly in Missouri and Illinois, close to St. Louis. But we had people that ran across our system, especially in the early days. We actually put up an early website when the web just got going, and people would find us, and they just loved it. And so we shipped it to the East Coast, to the West Coast. We shipped it
Wow.
north, quite a bit into Michigan. I mean, it was sort of amazing how many people just said, we just want that type of treatment. We want a more environmental. Um, uh, I should say environmental service from a retaining wall. We don't want just a face of concrete heating up and
Well, and
that
planting
look.
softens it too. It
Yeah.
softens the harshness of the concrete. And so I imagine so it kind of nests they nest into each other a bit. And
Uh,
is
yeah.
is there a limit on how high you can build with them?
Well, those particular blocks, no.
Okay.
It's kind of we exploited some engineering aspects of it because the course above sits, staggered back from the course below because of the width of the top lip on the block that holds the fill
Okay.
in. It created a natural setback or batter of 20 degrees.
Okay.
So the wall by definition was both a wall and a slope at 70 degrees of inclination.
Mm,
And so that enabled us to reinforce much more lightly. It decreased our hinge height, which is used to calculate, how much load is being picked up by the blocks in a wall.
mm.
And so we were more really of a slope than a wall, actually.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it gave us an advantage in putting in walls that were either unreinforced or lightly reinforced. So you could get closer to, let's say, mature trees. If you're putting in a home
Yeah.
development, and you want to save the big trees, but you want all your space, we could get closer to the tree and still, give the tree the space it needed with this system than other systems. And so we did really well on the structural aspect, and early on people still didn't know what to do with the plantable part of it. So well, okay, we bought it for the structure, and it was economical because of that. Now what do we do? And so we got we got really good at figuring out, what kind of
What
soil do you put in the
plants?
face,
Okay.
what kind of plants do you put in there, and giving guidance on the planting. And I'll say, all of these years later, I still drive by walls that are just spectacular today that I know were put
Oh,
in, 30 years ago. It's pretty cool.
yeah. And you don't need any drainage rock behind it, or would you, I guess, depending on how large the or tall the
Yeah.
wall is, you might want some.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I always tell everybody, drainage is cheap to put in when you're building it, and it's almost impossible to put in after it's
after.
built.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
you know, so the afterthought doesn't work very well with drainage. So, yeah, I would say, early on, everybody was trying to figure out what to do with these modular block walls, and we were a contemporary to early Keystone and Versalock and
Yeah.
some of the others, but we were plantable. And so they proliferated really quickly because they could just provide a mold box to someone that was making masonry block. And so very quickly they set up producers and distributors around the country, whereas we had a proprietary machine and it was a little harder for us to duplicate that. So
Yeah.
that was one of the holes in my
The
business plan
growth,
is
yeah, wasn't
we
as
couldn't we
easy.
couldn't scale very well,
Yeah.
but designers and engineers got used to putting these rock columns behind Keystone and Versalock, and it was a great thing because they didn't weep water as well and didn't relieve hydrostatic pressure as well, and they were much more vertical. I mean, they were 85 to 90 degrees in some cases, so they really, it was an integral part of that rock column behind it was a big deal. On ours, we suffered through it in the early days, being looked at just like Keystone, even though we had very different engineering properties. And then as we
Okay.
got bigger body of work and we'd engineered more complex walls, we started adapting and creating our own types of drainage areas. We tended to put drainage in like the bottom couple of feet of the wall all the way back to the
Okay.
cut. And we would cover that whole area. So it's kind of like a rock bag underneath the whole thing. So
Yeah.
instead of running a drainage column trying to mirror it up the face of the wall,
Yeah.
we did it all in the bottom and let everything drain through, and then we'd pipe it out the face.
Okay.
And so by having soil in the face of the units in contact with your backfill soil, that enables that wicking of moisture to come through, kind of
Yeah.
like wetting a paper towel on one end and it gets wet at the other eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what these hillsides would do. The face
Okay.
would dry out quick because it was like a vent on a hillside, and it would draw moisture out of the hillside, which pulls it towards the root mass that's living in the block face. So it was
Okay.
perfect for plant conditions.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. So, and we
Well,
we planted it with a lot of vines, regionally appropriate vines, and then we moved into sedums and succulents, and really just had some incredible diversity in the way the walls looked, because you could create with it. It wasn't about the way the block looked. It was about your
the
skill with
plants.
planting, plant
Yeah.
selection, and so we did have from some pretty skilled landscape architects and horticultural teams that laid out planting schemes on these walls that were very appropriate for the region, and then the position they faced, so the light setting.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, the results on some of them were just mind blowing. And of
I
course,
need to
you
see
never
some
saw the block.
pictures.
Yeah.
I need to-
Oh, I've got quite the archives. Back when I had to take the pictures on the job and then go run to the photo shop and have the film developed, and you didn't know if you got a good picture until you got it back.
That is old school.
Oh
My
yeah, that
kids
was
don't
my,
even know what that is.
and I had my roll of quarters so I could stop at a payphone and check my messages. Yeah,
Okay,
so
you're really
funny.
dating yourself, Mark.
I know. Yeah. But the one thing I'll say about this is it struck me when I traveled in Europe how cool it is to blend plants into
Mm,
a needed structure,
yeah.
and green the built environment. And so then with our systems, every job was an opportunity to see something super cool and creative. And in
And
every case,
unique even.
yeah. Oh, very unique. And you drew in, I call these walls habitat and green space because you draw in native pollinators and birds, and you're cooling the environment, and the wall, it does not absorb heat and radiate it into the atmosphere for urban heat island. It actually cancels that out, and they absorb rainwater treat runoff water, absorb carbon out of the atmosphere from the plants. You put
Well,
carbon into it by using locally made compost in the face. And so you're putting carbon into it and sequestering it, and then the plants are pulling carbon out of the air. So you really create environmental service out of these things as opposed to just a grade separation.
yeah, well, and the reason I came across your products is because I have that situation that you were talking about. I have a mature tree in our backyard that I don't want to damage, but I need retaining walls,
Yep.
So it's about protecting the tree, but also still making the backyard more usable and so I think it at first I was looking at gabions because we've used those a lot in Europe and Scotland
Yeah.
and I'm more familiar with it, but I'm also in South Louisiana and we don't,
Yeah.
it's not a easy thing to get rock, and so
Right.
or cheap thing. But I also wanted more greenery. So I think, it is amazing to see the niche that it fills when you're working around mature trees.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it gives you that flexibility in design and it helps you to design the space differently than you would if you did have something that was less permeable and you needed major drainage and you could possibly damage the tree through digging up to do foundations and drainage for a concrete wall, much less like you said, the heat island, um, water maybe building up behind the wall. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility. So what does this system that you developed and designed, does that still exist and is still being made somewhere or in St. Louis?
Well, yeah, that's a kind of an interesting question there too. The concrete industry just was like a wild west, and once they got beyond masonry blocks and ready mix, they got into all the different types of modular block for retaining walls. They got into pavers and paving products, and so these companies really got quite large because they had a lot more revenue streams than they did in the early days. Engineers and developers got used to using those systems, and so they really proliferated. And then they bought each other and consolidated. And it went from having 3 or 4 producers in a metropolitan area to one producer owning all of the locations. And
Okay.
that's kind of happened all around the country. And so the same thing happened with us. There was a large company coming in, acquiring everyone in the concrete business, and that's what happened in St. Louis. And I was the only company that really wasn't, it didn't fit their model because we didn't have a block machine. We had a custom
Yeah.
machine that made our block. And so it kind of made us an acquisition target, let's say,
Oh,
because once
okay.
all the other companies were under one roof, they pretty much had control of the market. But we felt like we were in a niche. We were providing living retaining walls, and
Yeah.
more slope type structures than straight up
It's a
and down
different
walls.
product. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but they didn't see it that way. They saw it as us taking part of the market that they wanted, and eventually they persuaded me to sell.
Okay.
and so I sold out, and I think they kept the product going for about a year, and then they
Oh.
just closed it out because what they really wanted was they wanted no competition for their closed face blocks like the Keystone, the Versalock,
Oh.
the Diamond block, those types of systems. So yeah, within about a year, they had gotten rid of my dry cast system, and I
And the
had gone,
machine to build it and everything?
yeah,
Or
all of it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
all of it. So I had that business for 17 years. And yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and we had a lot of fun with it. But anyway, we learned what can be done and not be done, and it makes me a great consultant for these types of vegetated retaining wall systems and living building systems because I've really tried it, seen it, done it. But anyway, as a good inventor, I mean, I had several patents on those systems. I went back to work and I decided to patent a system that could be made with wet cast concrete so that it could be more portable, and I could take
Oh
advantage
yeah.
of precasters around the country.
Yeah.
And
And more
I got,
scalable.
oh yeah, yeah. So I got several patents around the block there. And in this particular case, I had a non-compete with the people that bought me out. So I couldn't go directly into business like that. So I licensed those patents to a group on the East Coast. And we got going, and we did pretty well in the licensing agreement. I mean, they were making it, selling it, and I was their, kind of their technical guide. But they got busy with other aspects of their business, and just really stopped focusing on the living retaining walls. So I took back the patents at that point, and then you set up another company to make those. And I got a good head of steam up making those myself and selling them all over the place. And then I was bought out by somebody else that wanted to bring us into a much larger corporation and have me run a living wall division. And that worked great. I mean, it's really funny, the sordid history of all this.
I
That,
know.
it was a great opportunity, but that large company was subject to buyout, and they were bought very shortly after I came on
Oh
board.
no.
And the new acquirers had no interest in living retaining walls. And so
Gosh, it's a
uh,
story of it. Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's
like a
a story of
recurring thing.
perseverance. So they effectively put the thing on ice, and I had designed several additional systems, to work underneath that umbrella. And so eventually they got rid of everything they'd acquired in us and me, and I found myself back on my own again. And so then this VerdTech is really me acquiring back all of my patents and
Good.
focusing one business unit on everything that I have patents on and all my history, and that's what VerdTech is. And fortunately or unfortunately, we're running on passion. But we started in 2019, and right as we got everything rolling, COVID hit,
Oh,
and
God.
and that slowed us down massively, and we had to make several pivots, and so here we are
Well,
today.
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Oh, I say, definitely God has a purpose for me and all this perseverance. you know, I've been ahead of
Well,
the market for 30 years, and it's funny when people still think that living retaining walls are new, and
I
they
know.
haven't been new for me for a long time.
Well, and I'm sorry I thought that, but
Yeah,
yeah, opened my eyes to that. And, I really can't help but think that you were just way before your time.
yeah, yeah. I didn't think I was, but yeah. Well, and you know what? The market didn't think I was, because people bought and people love these
Yeah.
things. And it was really business competition. There were certain trends in business that were adopted and were profitable for large entities, and I was outside of that. I was more of a craft or niche product, but I
Yeah.
was still part of a very fast-moving main product market in retaining walls, modular block retaining walls. And so I was always like in a battle with that, even though I didn't intend to be,
Even though it was such a different product. Yeah. And
Right.
I do feel like, I mean, at SYNKD, what we are doing is combining, design, build, and maintain, because like even the conferences that I go to, like Cultivate, was very much about horticulture. And,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and, but I've always found the most interesting either products or ways of doing things is a culmination of construction and horticulture, like for just drainage, let's say.
Yeah.
This is from my experience in Scotland. Like, I have somebody that says, there's this wet part of my garden. I want underground drainage for that. And then I would say, well, okay, it's not as bad as you think. It's just because you're trying to grow turf grass there. Actually, I could plant up some really thirsty plants and change the slope and do a dry riverbed. I could do all of this
Yep.
for a fraction of the cost that underground drainage would cost you. And then they go, oh, wow, I didn't even know there were any other options rather than, digging it up, putting French drains or
Right.
drainage underground. And that's a really, the heavy construction part is a really expensive option. And I always did residential design and construction. So like residential, I mean, I have put in that kind of drainage and it can be $10,000-$20,000, like
Right.
just for the drainage. And then you have to build the rest of the landscape. But when I said, well, let's try this is, a fraction of the cost. Let's see if it solves your problem. I have a lot of confidence that we can do something aesthetically beautiful and fixing your drainage problem, but it won't be what you visualize. It's something like this. And, after we started coming up with those kind of creative solutions that are halfway between construction, it's maybe a little bit
Yeah.
of construction and a
Right.
little bit of planting, our audience, our clients actually liked it better than what they had visualized before. And so that's what I mean when we're trying to synchronize
Yeah.
as synced design, build, and maintain. And what I like about so much about a living retaining wall is, like I said, it goes back to the design phase. It's a construction or horticulture or green infrastructure product, but it actually can change the way you design,
Oh yeah.
because now you can build closer to existing trees and planting, and and do something that sits in between everything. But you have to know a little bit about plants, like you said. People would
Yeah.
build them and then go, uh-oh, what do we put here? So
Yep.
you have to have that green knowledge and that construction knowledge to make it work. And I imagine, in the maintenance side of things, whoever's maintaining it, whether it's the client or a maintenance company, they kind of have to understand how it was built. And, if certain plants aren't doing well, they have to, know
Yeah.
what the options are to replace that. So I really like that niche of, you know, your product and everything you've been working towards actually needs education in design, build, and maintain to work
Oh
and
yeah.
to thrive. And I'm so excited that you have agreed to come to our Synced Live 2024
Oh yeah.
event, um,
Yeah.
and show off your newest products, because they're not made of cement or concrete.
They're
um,
not.
yeah, tell us
Yeah.
more.
Well, and before I say anything about that, I
Oh
want to just
yeah.
make a little comment, segue on what you were saying. You were talking about design, build, and maintain. And over all my career, the thing that was always the hardest was the living aspect of these walls. And people wanted it, but they didn't fully want to understand what it would take to be successful long term with it. With the plants and
Yeah.
the covering of the face. And so we would bid on these commercial projects, and you would have 20 bidders, let's say, and the low bid always got the job. And the low bidder,
uh,
invariably, didn't have anything in there for the plant material. In fact, they were trying to push
oh
that off to
no.
someone else. No, we're just going to, our price just includes building the wall. Somebody else has to come in and plant it. So immediately you've got a disjointed situation. So now you've got like maybe another contract that would be let for a landscape company to come in and plant it, and they didn't know what to do with the wall. And of
Well, and
course they were
they don't
low
know
bid
what's
as
been
well,
put in behind it too. If
and there
like
was
maybe
no
they use
coordination.
subsoil or not,
Well,
soil
and
to
there
grow
was
in.
always a fight over what to put in the face, because I would say you want to put a compost blend in there, because that way it doesn't have what topsoil does, which is a latent seed.
Yeah.
You skin topsoil off a job site, it's going to have seed
Oh,
in it,
that's the
and you put it
worst.
in
Yeah.
the face pocket, and now you create favorable conditions. It grows, and so you could plant something you wanted in the pocket, but it would get outgrown by the opportunistic
Weeds.
plants that were in there.
Yeah.
So I would always say put compost in there because it's the best deal for the environment all the way around, and it's clean. And if it's properly made,
Yeah.
the weed seed has been cooked out in the maturation process.
Yeah.
So
And
it'll
it
grow what you
continually
introduce.
feeds. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So anyway, there was nobody taking ownership of that except for us as the vendor, but we didn't have any control over that because people would say, "Oh, you're just selling the block." you know. So that design,
Ah,
build, maintain was always really hard to get people to do. So what I liked, the aspect of it I liked the most is when we got residential work. There were a lot of railroad tie
yeah.
walls that were built and that rotted and failed. And so we would get a lot of railroad tie wall replacements. And many of those were residential. And we could communicate directly with the end user or the owner. And
Yeah.
we could guide the right soil, talk to them about plants. And so we had, some very successful living walls in the residential setting. And to me, it's always made great sense to use a contractor that's going to do the design, then build it, and build it with the eye to the outcome, and then
Yeah.
plant it, and then perhaps have a maintenance contract, to come
Yeah.
in and, you could, if you know you're going to be in a dry situation and you want plant material that's going to need more water than you might get through rain, you can incorporate irrigation in the face of these walls easily for pennies.
Yeah.
And so, it gives the integrated practitioner the opportunity to really create something special that's also economical and very unique for their owner. But you have to include all three: design, build, maintain. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that, that the what we're doing is, with Synced and Synced Live is about looking at all three of the segments or sectors of the industry and doing, it will really help elevate the industry. And I think our industry has always, you know, not been understood enough,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
I agree. Yeah,
and
I
because
agree.
of that, horticulture, construction, mix, and landscape architects, sometimes you maybe won't even have a landscape architect involved, and and
Right.
also, you know, maintenance companies are just they're left with however construction built it. And like you said,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the way construction often is in a commercial sense is bid out and risk averse and low margin, so it's done as, as quick and moved on
Right.
as quick as possible. So um what I'm excited to do is show off your products in person to those full service landscape companies that want to be unique and leading the charge. And I think, like I said earlier, I think you you were you were ahead of your time. And I think there's a lot more now about, heat islands and greening up cities, that, is much more appreciated now. I've heard
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of people, I've been in Europe for the last 20 years with my landscape company, but I've heard a lot of people say, because I've said, why aren't more people using porcelain paving? Why don't we have more permeable paving options? Why this, why that? And I've heard many times since I've moved back to the US that Europe is 10 years ahead of the US. And I didn't believe it at first, but,
Yeah.
maybe, your story, a lot of other people's stories, maybe that is the way, because it's such a big country,
Yeah.
it's, and really it's hard to talk to it, because we have all these silos, like, concrete conference, cultivate conference, separate conferences.
Right.
It's hard for products like yours to get a fair
Oh yeah.
showing. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that that needs to change, and let's bring us into the into the
yeah,
modern world and learn from things that have been going on, like you said, your company for 17 years. You know, that's a lot of history that unfortunately seems to kind of be
yeah,
lost, but you're reviving it. So
right.
kudos to you for sticking in there
Yeah,
and not giving up. So
yeah,
I think, yeah. Well, we haven't talked about the new product yet.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. It's really funny, I mean, so yeah, I sold that company. I had it for 17 years. I sold that in 2004. And that seems like ages ago. I mean,
It is
that
ages
was
ago.
that was another 20 years ago. So but I continually stayed in the market and kept doing this the whole time, just finding new ways. Because the thing was, every time I sold a business for whatever reason, I had to think about, what was my passion? What did I want to do with my day? And I've always been passionate about these living plantable retaining walls and greening the built environment. And so, I just gravitate right back to that. So when I got out of the dry cast concrete business, I started designing systems that could be wet cast. And then I got out of the wet cast business sort of inadvertently. And I thought, okay, I've learned so much about the engineering aspects of these walls and the way they work, and what really works and what doesn't work. And we all knew, or anybody that's a skilled practitioner knows, that the facing material, the weight of that facing material doesn't matter at all. You're building a reinforced soil mass using geogrid or other types of reinforcement, and it's the reinforced mass that is holding back the earth in a retaining structure.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so the facing is merely there to prevent erosion during the building and allow compaction. Because if you had geogrids, vertically every 2 feet, let's say, and you just tried to compact them, soil would slough off at the face.
Yeah.
So by using a block or some other type of form at the face, you enable the contractor to tightly backfill and compact that lift at that elevation without it
Hmm.
sloughing off.
Yeah.
And then once the wall is built, the facing is just erosion protection. It's just kind of along for the ride. It's reclined against a stable backfill that's made stable by the geogrid. So, I learned that from, almost like the gabion baskets, or the welded wire face panel walls. Those
Hmm.
things don't weigh anything, but they put weight in the face, as they build it with rock or something,
Yeah.
and they reinforce them. So my latest version is made out of reprocessed plastic, and it's injection molded, so it's very precise, much more precise than a concrete block wall.
Hmm.
And it has, thinner walls, and it's open on the sides and the bottom, so that you get real transfer of moisture and roots through the whole system when it's built. And it holds massive amounts of fill. I mean, relative to the block itself, it's like 99% fill. And
Wow.
so the
Yeah.
so the that was the thing. You could have a more successful living wall the bigger the fill holding pocket was, and you
Yeah.
still had to overcome that unit heating up before the plants grew in really well. So you could get excessive heat built up on that concrete block that would heat up the soil mass as well. And so, with the new system, it's all soil mass,
Yeah.
and so we keep the soil mass a little cooler, and it's more integrated, and roots can move through the whole thing freely and sort of stitch it together.
I
So
was going
it
to say it
really,
probably helps stitch it all together. I think that's a good
oh
word to use because as
yeah,
roots get all grown in there, it just gets
yeah.
stronger.
You can't get one of these apart. So anyway, I just took advantage of the what I know about the engineering aspects of these walls, and the fact that even in plastic we still have a batter of 20 degrees. So we're building, our steepest wall angle is 70 degrees as opposed to 85 or 90. So there's a
Okay.
little bit of setback to it, which works great for the plant culture, and it works great for engineering. And so then again, we're just a compaction form so that the contractor can compact and backfill and everything stays nice and tight. And, even though we've heavily engineered this reprocessed plastic block, we really know that it's so innovative and unique that if there was ever a problem, it would quickly be blamed and we'd have to prove that it wasn't us. So I limited the height on this. We published that it's only to be used for walls 5 feet and under. And
Okay.
really, that's fine because it guarantees that it's going to be a lot of DIY, a lot of landscape, a lot of low retaining walls that don't have a lot of liability. And that's the vast majority of the market anyway, is small
Well,
blocks, small walls.
and if I think in the design realm, if
Yeah.
I build a 20-foot wall, it's gonna look like you know, a fortress,
Yep.
it's not gonna look as nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but doing four, or four terraces, or
Yeah.
doing terracing instead, and you can have planting in between, it's a
Yep.
much more aesthetically pleasing wall, and then you could even do different shapes. And yeah,
Yeah.
so 5 feet's pretty tall.
Yeah. Well, with our concrete systems, we did walls. Of course, it's just based on the reinforcement. It's not the facing. We did walls up into the 50-foot range, over
Wow.
50 feet,
Yeah.
for big commercial development. But your time, your sales cycle on that, your design time, all of it is just very consuming. I mean, you might
Yeah.
be working on a project for 18 months, before you ever
Yeah.
deliver block.
Yeah.
Whereas the residential market and the landscape market, people can say, you know what, this is a really cool facing treatment. I like it, and that's what I want. And it
Yeah.
turns very quickly, and you're much closer to the customer that's going to enjoy it. So you can have those conversations about plant selection and what type of soil to include in the
Yeah.
face, and
It
then
fixes the
maintenance.
problem that you talked about earlier with,
Yeah,
you wanting to talk more directly to the end
yeah,
user and the
yeah.
quality.
But
Well,
because this new block is the way it's injection molded out of plastic, they nest, and so we can get up to 450 block on one wood shipping pallet, and each block covers a square foot. So 450 square feet of buildable product on one pallet. That's as much as a whole semi
whoa.
load of Keystone you know. So it doesn't take up any room on your job site. You can ship it by LTL freight, or even we can put it in boxes and ship it by FedEx and UPS.
Wow.
And
Well,
so,
that's a
we
game
can
changer
go.
for transport. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So our standard pallet is 250 blocks is our standard pallet,
Okay.
but we could go all the way up to 450. But 250 works pretty good, and we ship those things out every day. People come on our website and they buy either a pallet of 250 or a couple of pallets of 100, or we have them boxed at 10 blocks in a box, and they might buy 3 boxes, and they just get delivered by FedEx or UPS to your door. And it doesn't weigh anything. A box of 10 blocks weighs 30 pounds. and
Wow.
and
Wow.
yeah, so you got 10 square feet in a box, and so when you talk about building around trees or little walls, for grade changes around your patio, you might only need 3 or 4 boxes a block, and
Gosh.
it's just really simple.
Game changer. I love
Well,
it.
it is, but people can't buy it if they don't know it exists. And I've been
Yeah.
saying that to my salespeople for over 30 years. So our job is always advocacy and to build visibility.
Yeah.
And that job has not changed in all the years I've been doing this. It's still its number one job. People can't buy it if they don't know about it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Well, I hope at Synked we can help you get the word out and do more education on what is possible, because there's a whole lot more possible today than there ever has been. So due to all your hard work, thank you so much, Mark. And
Yeah.
thanks for being on our show. Where can you want to say your website where people can go to buy your products?
Yeah. You can find us at verticalgardensupply.com. And A lot of our products are on there: the vertical gardening, the vertical farming, the living walls, and then the living retaining walls. They're all on there. So we're covering a lot of sub niches of the living structure niche that we're already in. But anyway, there's pretty good information there. And of course, if there isn't something that a person would want, like this, let's say they don't find the right specs or details, they can always contact us through the website, and we're happy to provide more information and answer questions and be good consultants for the product.
Awesome. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thanks so much. And if the audience is listening, Mark will be at our show in February in Atlanta. So Sync Live, you can meet him there and see and touch the product.
Yeah, that'll be very exciting. I can hardly
Yeah.
wait.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mark, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Thanks for
Thanks,
joining
Angelique.
us.
Take
Okay,
care. See you.
bye.
Bye.
Saludos, es Amy con Synced On Air desde Turfs Up Radio, dándoles el resumen breve del episodio de hoy con Mark Woolbright desde Vertec Inc. Y vamos a hablar de la amplia experiencia de Mark en la industria de la construcción sustentable, donde ha estado involucrado en la creación de productos innovadores como muros de contención plantables desde el 1902. Mark comparte los desafíos y éxitos de su viaje, enfatizando la importancia de los enfoques holísticos que abarcan el diseño, la construcción y mantenimiento en proyectos paisajísticos. Angelique y Mark exploran los beneficios ambientales de los sistemas de muros vivos de Mark, como atraer polinizadores nativos, enfriar el medio ambiente y absorber agua de lluvia. La pasión de Mark por integrar plantas en el entorno construido y crear hábitats y espacios verdes se hace evidente. La conversación destaca los desafíos de lograr que la industria adopte enfoques holísticos, especialmente en la construcción comercial, donde la velocidad y costo a menudo tienen prioridad sobre la sostenibilidad a largo plazo. Angelique expresa su entusiasmo por mostrar los productos de Mark a empresas de paisajismo de servicio completo, ansiosas por liderar el camino en proyectos sostenibles y únicos. Mark Woolbright reflexiona sobre su trayectoria en la industria y menciona que vendió su empresa después de dirigirla durante 17 años en 2004. A pesar de los años que han pasado, su pasión por las paredes vegetales vivas y por hacer más ecológicos los entornos construidos se ha mantenido constante. Después de dejar el negocio de hormigón moldeado en seco, comenzó a diseñar sistemas que podían transmitirse por web y luego siguió con otras empresas. Mark ofrece información sobre los aspectos de ingeniería de los muros de contención, subrayando que el peso del material de revestimiento es intrascendente. En cambio, la función principal del material de revestimiento es prevenir la erosión durante la construcción y facilitar la compacción adecuada del suelo. La verdadera fuerza de retención proviene de la masa del suelo reforzada, fortificada con geomalla u otras técnicas de refuerzo. Mark detalla el diseño único del sistema de plástico, que mantiene una inclinación de 20 grados, lo que permite un ángulo de pared máximo de 70 grados. Este diseño satisface tanto las necesidades de ingeniería como de cultivo de plantas. Subraya que su sistema sirve como forma de compacción, simplificando los procesos de compacción y relleno para los contratistas y asegurando la creación de una estructura firme y estable. para mitigar posibilidades y problemas de responsabilidad y priorizar la seguridad. Mark ha estabilizado en límite de altura para estos bloques de plástico, haciéndolos adecuados para paredes de 5 pies o menos, lo que se alinea bien con el mercado de bricolaje y paisajismo, donde prevalecen los muros de contención para pequeños. Por último, presenta su último proyecto, un sistema de muro de conexión de plástico moldeado por inyección. Este innovador sistema cuenta con precisión en su diseño, con paredes más delgadas, lados y fondo abiertos para una transferencia óptima de humedad y raíces, y un generoso bolsillo para contener el relleno. Además, aborda la cuestión de la temperatura del suelo, manteniendo un ambiente más fresco, propicio para el crecimiento de las plantas y al mismo tiempo permitiendo que las raíces se interconecten, fortaleciendo la estructura. Luego explica el diseño único del sistema plástico y sus ventajas. Mark enfatiza la importancia de la visibilidad y la promoción en la industria, mencionando su sitio de web verticalgardensupply.com, donde los clientes pueden explorar una gama de productos y consultar detalles específicos del producto. Angelique Robb menciona la próxima aparición de Mark en SYNKD Live en febrero en Atlanta del 2024, donde los asistentes tendrán la oportunidad de conocerlo en persona y obtener más información sobre sus productos innovadores. Muchas gracias por sintonizándose con SYNKD On Air y no se olvide que pueden ir a nuestro sitio de web para leer la entrevista completa en español y como siempre, por favor, sigue a todos nuestros sociales red de SYNKD y deja un gusto y seguirnos. Hasta la próxima semana.